CPA-turned-hospitality entrepreneur who's really become one of the most influential figures in the short-term rental industry.
To do it, but I'm going to find a way to build us a business that gives us the income we want without ever trading time for money again.
All right, welcome to another episode of the Radical Hospitality Podcast. I'm your host, Zeke Freeman. Super excited today. We've got none other than Michael Sjogren on with us. Michael is a CPA turned hospitality entrepreneur who's really become one of the most influential figures in the short-term rental industry. He's the founder of Short-Term Rental Secrets, a leading educational platform that's empowered thousands of real estate investors to launch, automate, and scale their short-term rentals and boutique hotels, including ourselves. He's got a portfolio over 90 plus properties, including 2 boutique hotels on the Boston North Shore and other projects on the way across 3 states, which I'm really excited to dive in, learn more about today with Mike. Man, he has just proved that financial freedom through real estate is possible with the right mindset. I love how Mike approaches everything in a way of, it's not just about numbers, but it's about, getting the right mindset and going after it. He's also the co-founder of STR WealthCon, which is the world's largest host-driven short-term rental conference, bringing together thousands of short-term rental professionals every year. Had the pleasure of seeing Mike on the stage in 2024 and had the pleasure to connect with him recently at Blake Daly's Boutique Hotel Con. My absolute pleasure to welcome you on the show, Mike. Welcome to Radical Hospitality.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, thanks for being on. Well, for our guests and our audience, you want to just give us a little background? I know you came from a CPA world to just building this short-term rental empire. What was kind of that turning point that got you out of the day-to-day CPA world and headed into short-term rentals?
Yeah, man, I did what they told me to do, right? I went to school, I got good grades, got a good job, went back, got my MBA, CPA license, all these things. And from the outside looking in, I was doing pretty good. I had a house in the burbs, a couple cars in the driveway, and everything changed when my son was born. Back in 2016, he was born with a very rare lung disease called interstitial lung disease. And basically, anytime he fell asleep, he needed to be on oxygen. And so, imagine one day waking up, he's, a week or 2 old. I go to wake him up for his newborn photo shoot, and I go grab him, take him out of the crib, and I can't wake him up, right? And it was one of the scariest and craziest moments of my life. And it kicked off this 2-year run of weeks and weeks at a time spent at Boston Children's Hospital trying to figure out what was going on with him. And at a certain point, I ran out of vacation time. I ran out of sick time. I had all these hospital bills piling up, and I had to leave my wife and my baby in the hospital to go back to a desk and trade time for money. And it broke me. It was one of those things. Tony Robbins talks about extreme emotional events. It was a very extreme emotional event for me. And that day I made a decision, and I told my wife, I said, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to find a way to build us a business that gives us the income we want without ever trading time for money again. And I knew that real estate was going to be the vehicle. I didn't know it was going to be short-term rentals. I had never even stayed in an Airbnb prior to that, but I met a gentleman in a mastermind group who at the time was doing rental arbitrage. And this is well before it was a sexy thing to go out and rent an apartment and then re-rent it on Airbnb. And he was showing me the math on how much he was making on these units. And I didn't even know if it was legal. He wasn't telling the owners what he was doing. It was pretty sketchy, but he was making some good money. And I was like, okay, this makes sense. I don't know about this whole rent to rent thing, but I've been doing what they told me to do. I've been putting some money in a 401k. What if I take a loan out of the 401k, go buy a cabin up in the mountains in New Hampshire, get a 0% interest credit card, fix it up, and just see how it goes. And so that's what we did. Started with a 2-bedroom condo up in the mountains in New Hampshire, renovated it on some credit cards, and launched it and prayed honestly that it would work. And it worked. We were netting about $1,500 a month on this little 2-bedroom condo. And I was sold. I was like, this is the key. But now I'm completely broke. I can't live off of $1,500 a month. And I got to figure out a way to keep growing this thing. And so I had this idea of, well, what if I just look for people that are renting out their properties long-term, closer to me, up near Boston area, and just pitch them this, hey, you could be making way more money if we rent this thing by the night instead of by the year. And I can do all the legwork. I'll design it. I'll build it out. You just pay for the furnishing. and I'll just take a small cut, right? And today we know that as co-hosting. A lot of people weren't doing that back then. A lot of people told me, and I was an idiot back then, and I was going to have 50 different bosses telling me what to do all the time. But something inside of me felt like this was the way to scale. I just didn't have any more money, and I really wanted to get out of my job and get my wife out of her job. And so I just went with it, and I started hosting local meetups, doing webinars, like talking to as many people as I could about this thing. And it took me 9 months before I landed my first co-hosting deal. But 12 months later, we had 15 properties we were running across 5 different states. And I was able to, quit my job, get my wife out of her job, and retire my mom. And then we were off to the races, right? And then had an opportunity to get into my first hotel deal back in 2020, and then manage another hotel deal back in 21. And then we purchased another hotel in 2022, which we're finally finishing up renovating in the next couple months. Now, actually, I don't think I've talked about this publicly yet, but we're moving forward on a new development project in the Outer Banks that'll be kicking off later this summer. I am super grateful for this industry. It completely changed my life. And I've been very fortunate to coach thousands of people at this point to, launch, automate, and scale a short-term rental business and get into hotels and leave their jobs. And I always told a mentor of mine years ago, I said, when I figure this thing out, I'm gonna share it with people. And I love teaching. And so I've had an amazing opportunity to do that and help a lot of people. And it's just awesome, man. Like my life, I wouldn't trade my life for anyone. Like truly, truly.
I love it. I love it. You're not busy at all, are you, Mike?
Well, it's interesting. We can dive into that too. But the thing that I focused on, right, was like building businesses that don't require me to trade time for money, right? And I've analyzed this over and over and over again, and that was always my mantra. And I use this analogy now where there's 3 ways to play this game. You can be the player, you can be the coach, or you can be the owner or the CEO, right? And most people in the short-term rental game, and there's no right or wrong way to do this, but most people in the short-term rental game, they're the player. Like they're the one doing the revenue management, guest communication, coordinating cleanings, coordinating maintenance. They're the player on the field running the plays. Then you can graduate to that and you start building a team of VAs or local people, and you're coaching those people to make sure they're executing on it. And then you can elevate to a different level where you're the CEO and you have a management team that are managing the players, and you have a lot more time freedom, right? And so to me, that was always the focal point of my goal was never to be the best short-term rental operator or any of those other goals. It was like, I want to create passive income for myself. And I wasn't financially in a place to go invest enough to buy that freedom, right? Most people that come to me for help, they're making somewhere around 200 grand a year in a good quote unquote safe job, but they want to get out and they want to be back in control of their time. And so if you want to make 200 grand a year in passive income investing, say you're getting a 20% return, you need $1 million liquid to go and buy that kind of freedom. Most people are not in a place to do that. I definitely was not in a place to do that. So I built a service-based business that created cash flow to allow me to go out at a certain point and start investing and then doubling down. And now I'm at a point where I can truly sit in the owner's seat where I'm not running any of the day-to-day, and I've got the passive income side going.
I mean, that's what I like about the short-term rentals is it's kind of a combination of real estate and business. And, if you come in with an approach of a business mindset, and whether you're running, like we run an architecture firm or running short-term rentals, it's the same way. Both of them can just overtake your life and you can create one job for the other. When you're moving out of U2 into short-term rentals or whatever the job is, how are you coaching people to not just create this, other life job? You say, you can become a CEO. What are some of the things that you recommend putting into place to really not let this, trade one problem for another?
So I use this acronym CASPER, right? It's just this model that I've developed over time. So the first part is clarity. You got to know what you actually want, right? And start with the end in mind. Some people just want to make a few extra bucks. They like what they're doing and they want to start building up some passive income, like a little pension fund for themselves. That's great, right? But if you really want to build a business with systems, right? You're building a machine that is going to make money for you without trading time, then you need to go through this process, right? So it's clarity, and then you need a process or a system for acquisitions. How are you getting more clients or more properties? And then you need all the operational systems to run those things and create as much efficiency as possible. And then as you start generating revenue, then you shift into hiring the right people and onboarding and training and leading and coaching those people. And then eventually you can elevate to a CEO role and bring on an ops manager or director to oversee those people. And then at that point, you get to reassess, pitch your goals. You've built a business that's running essentially without you. I can find passive income is less than 4 hours a month. If you're spending an hour a week or less, you've got some passive income going on, right? So at that point, when you've got that model in place, you should be at 4 hours a month or less, right? And then you get to reassess. Do I want to double down on this? Do I want to exit this business? Do I want to sell the business? Do I want whatever I want to do with it? What's the next thing? And so we're constantly just reevaluating goals, because at a certain point you'll hit your goal. And then it's important to go ahead and set another goal, right? My goal has evolved over time. At the beginning, it was to get out of a job. Now I've got a lot bigger goals than that.
So we currently run an architecture firm in real estate, and I've always looked at the short-term rental portion of it as, that is another business, the management portion of it. And so we've taken the approach of hiring out managers to manage our short-term rentals. We're going to do the same on our boutique hotel. Do you generally recommend building out that business? Is that a faster, better path versus focusing on the real estate portion and hiring out other teams that are already doing that? Where do you tend to guide people getting into this?
It goes back to the goals piece. Right? So you're running a business that I'm assuming you like doing on the architecture side, right? And so you want to create additional cash flow and build wealth with real estate, but there's an opportunity cost for you, right? So, and I've seen this over time, right? A lot of the people that I've managed properties for over the years, they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. And then they start focusing more on the real estate, and then their main business falls off because they're not giving it the attention that it needs. So you got to look at it from an opportunity cost standpoint. If you're coming to me and you're telling me, listen, Mike, I'm bringing in, again, just say 200 grand, and I need to replace 200 grand as quickly as possible, and you don't have the funds to buy that type of freedom passively, then I would say, co-hosting or management or some type of service-based business allows you to scale and create income faster than anything else, because you don't have the capital and those financial resources to buy that freedom yet. So that's how I was able to do it. And that's how it's typically a blend of, maybe folks have enough money to buy 1 or 2 properties, but they're not going to hit their goal of, say, 20 grand a month that they want to make to leave their, good quote unquote corporate job. So they got to scale it faster. But if they've got a 20-year run and they want to do it, okay, well, that's different. If you want to do it in 2 years versus 20 years, you got to look at it differently of, how do I compress time and how do I accelerate my income in order to buy that level of freedom later.
And is it still a decent business model to come into? Has it not got oversaturated, both on the number of Airbnbs, but also on the number of hosts? So like if you were looking to come in, like we're actually taking over management on one of our hotels, on one of our Airbnbs. And, we're really doing it just to, we feel like we could automate that and pretty much have good control, but not really wanting to get into host other people's things. Is there still a good market to build that business out? And are you seeing new students come in and able to scale at this point, or has that gotten saturated as well as the Airbnbs?
100%. The reason I say that is 3 years ago, you could have thrown a porta potty on Airbnb and made money, right? Now that the market's normalized, you got to know what you're doing. So and I'm not poo-pooing on anybody, but a lot of people that came into it, it was quote unquote easy money, and they didn't treat it like a business. It was a side hustle thing. I'm teaching people how to build a business where you have systems, process, people, structure, repeatable mechanisms to increase revenue, decrease expenses, maximize profit. We've just built an engine that is replicatable for people, but you got to treat it like a business, right? We're analyzing P&L statements. We're looking at KPI sheets. Like, it's an actual business. It's not a cute hobby where I'm like, yay, I get to host people and be a hospitable host and do all that stuff. That's fine if you want to do that. If you want to scale a business, you can take over right now. And a lot of the deals that we've gotten for our students has been through poor management companies with owners that are tired of the poor performance on their portfolios, especially from some of the huge companies out there that have just been buying leads over time and acquiring other companies to grow and scale because they're playing a completely different game in the equity space than most people are in this space. And their attrition is terrible. Like they're losing clients left and right because they used to make 60 grand a year and now they're making 30 grand a year with this big box management company because the big box isn't paying attention because they're so big. And it's not that they don't care. They're just playing a different game. They're playing a valuation game based on economies of scale. So we're gobbling up a lot of those and growing portfolios very quickly for the boutique professional operator right now.
Yeah, I heard one of these big operators talking about trying to get back to being more of a mom and pop operator. Like it's always been kind of a negative connotation to call somebody, mom and pop, but the mom and pop feel was something that, people really enjoy.
Care.
You show up, they care, they have, and so doing that at scale is tricky. And again, that's one of the reasons I think we're kind of taking over our little short-term rental is to, try to re-put some of that in there because there's enough in the market. Like people, you need to have a differentiator. I've seen so you guys have moved into boutique hotels as well. Are you finding a similar effect there with management and, creating that like personal touch on the management side and the operability? How are you guys working through and doing some of that?
There's a lot of similarities, but there's a different, depending on which class of property you want to go after, there tends to be higher standards for hotels, I would say. People just expect more because it's a hotel in the level of hospitality, depending on how you want to pitch yourself, right? So for the first almost 4 years, I built an in-house team and we were running a bunch of hotels, right? I had the team under me. And then I got to that point in the Casper where I was reassessing my goals and figuring out which direction I wanted to go and which game I wanted to play, player, coach, or owner. And I landed on, I really just want to focus on the owner spot now. Like I'm at a point, this is not from an arrogant standpoint where I don't need to survive off of management income because I've built portfolios and other businesses over time. And so I made a decision to hire out the management for the hotels. And I've got a great partner in a large boutique management firm that does a great job. I was very familiar with them, sat down and met with the owner to just honestly pick his brain one day for an afternoon. And then we just got to talking and I was like, why don't I just have these guys do it? Like they already have the economies of scale. I've stayed at some of their hotels. They do a great job. And it's been great. Right. And so I also had the advantage of managing them for a few years to understand all the operational nuances of how it works and how to maximize revenue and decrease expenses. So I'm a much more effective asset manager and owner now because I got my hands dirty for a few years and built that team around it.
Yeah.
So I do think that there's a huge opportunity for that. And a lot of our students are, one, they're acquiring their own deals, but they're also growing their management businesses in the hotel space because there's this sweet spot from that like 10 to 50 key hotel it's just way too small for the bigger operators to even get any attention. But there's a lot of those mom and pop baby boomer owners that either want to sell or they just need some help with marketing and bringing their property up to par for the market now. So a lot of those people need help, but there's not a lot of operators that can serve that need right now.
So, we've gone through the last year, interviewed a lot of these. Probably, I think we interviewed the guys you work with and have brought in a management partner on it. As an asset manager, like putting on that hat versus property manager, what are the things that you are putting in place or doing that create a better job of being an asset manager? What are the things to watch for people like us that are coming in and hiring other management companies?
So it comes down to communication and then standards. So one thing I really like, and I don't think this is something they typically do, but I get a report every day in my inbox for the hotels and how we're pacing. So I can see what our occupancy is, what our revenue is, the bookings that have come in over the previous day and over the previous 7 days. So I get a pulse every single day of where we stand with the portfolio. And then I get monthly financials that we review. At the beginning, we would do a monthly call to go through and walk through all those financials, make sure everybody was super clear about what we were looking at, what expenses were at, why things were at. Every year we get a budget presented to us of here's what the budget's going to look like for the year based on our projections that we think based on this market. And so it's more of just evaluating KPIs, booking trends. The other day I asked them for a report of, what was the breakdown of our bookings, percentage direct versus the different OTAs, because I was curious like where our marketing dollars were going and were they driving direct bookings. So it's been great because again, I understand the business now. So I can look at those different reports, and not that it's been an issue, but I can smell through the muck if somebody's trying to pull a fast one on me. Right.
Yeah.
Like, no, that doesn't make sense.
I
And
imagine
I
that
also understand the revenue
CPA
management of it.
background is very helpful on reading through these financial reports. What are some of the KPIs? And, you mentioned daily, monthly, and annuals that, you're having your team send you. What are some of the KPIs that are important to getting those reports to be watching?
I mean, from a fundamental level, the number one metric that I look at is RevPAR, right? So most people look at ADR and occupancy, which are good. But at the end of the day, the question is it better to have higher occupancy and lower ADR? Or is it better to have lower occupancy and higher ADR? The answer is to maximize your RevPAR. And that's just your total revenue divided by the number of rentable units for the month. That's how much every single room made you per day. Right. So I'm looking at that and tracking that. How much money is each room making per day? Right. And I just want to maximize that. And then again, I'm looking at the pacing. Where are we pacing? What's our occupancy look like for June, July, August, September, October, at least the next 6 months? And is that above or below where we were pacing over the last 12 months and above or below what the market is pacing at? So comparing historical data to market data.
And to watch the market, are you pulling like
I
continual
have
CoStar
CoStar
reports?
access.
Yeah.
So we submit data to STR. So I have a comp set that we built so I can compare our performance every single month to all of our comp set. I can't see individual properties. That's one difference from STRs versus hotels. You can only see the blended average because nobody likes to, show you under the covers in the commercial world, but I can compare us to our comp sets.
Okay. And so you mentioned, I don't know if you're okay to talk about it, but you said you guys are getting ready to break ground on another project or are under construction on another project in the Outer Banks.
Yeah. So I
You
had
able to
a
talk about that a
member in
little bit?
I had a member in our 7-figure boardroom, which is like our highest level mentorship group. And he's been working on this deal for a couple years and he finally got it closed and entitled. And he's an amazing developer, lives down there for a very long time. And I'm really excited about it. It's right in Kitty Hawk. It's going to be right on the beach, 47 keys, plus a restaurant, plus a conference convention area. There'll be beachside like bathhouse with amenities and beachside bar, umbrella service, chair service, like all of those things. So a very high-end boutique experience right on the beach in Kitty Hawk, which I'm super excited about. It'll be about an 18-month build. And yeah, I'm just really excited. So I've been watching him during this process. And then about a month ago, he asked if I would partner with him on the deal. And I really liked the deal. So I said, yes.
Love it. Yeah. It definitely takes a lot more patience. I mean, we just broke ground officially last week and we're 2.5 years of dealing with entitlements and financing. And it is an ordeal. And I've been watching everybody. Yeah.
Yes.
But I've been watching everybody else, pick up the, mom and pops and renovate and get going. And that looks pretty attractive. But I think in the long term, like if you love building something new and love construction and creating from the ground up and you're in a market that doesn't have those assets, it's a really unique skill set, but a special thing to be able to do to come in. And we're hoping that pays off. What are some of the things that you've seen different from development? Again, kind of watching this versus and now hopping in as a partner versus just buying and renovating existing hotels. Pros, cons.
So the big difference just from STRs to hotels in general, and I tell people this, is like hotels is a team sport. Like commercial real estate's a team sport, right? And when we talk about development, I have 2 great partners on the other stuff that we have that are developers and they understand that construction world frontwards, backwards, upside down. Like they are amazing with that stuff. And then I brought the operational expertise for running a hospitality business. And so my advice to people is go after deals that are big enough that there's enough pie to go around. Because if you're trying to do everything yourself because you're going after smaller deals that are in your comfort zone, you're going to can be very overwhelmed very quickly, because there's just so many more things that you need to think about on a commercial side and at scale with multiple units in one area versus a single family house. So commercial real estate is a team sport all day long.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first thing, right? And the second thing is, I always look at STRs as great cash flow plays. You can generate cash flow relatively quickly from STRs. Alluding to your point, a lot of times the hotels are great and they do produce great cash flow, but it's a longer play. You know, it could take you 3, 6, 9, 12, 18 months to renovate and turn over a hotel. But the biggest key with the hotels is your control over the valuation and the equity on the back end is exponentially greater than single families. And I'll give you a simple example. My wife and I bought a 11-bedroom house in Kissimmee, Florida, near Disney World back in 2021. And at the time, the owner, it was fairly new. He owned it for like a year. And the most that anybody had ever done in revenue in that community was like 160 grand. Our first year operating it after we renovated it, we did 300 grand, basically netted like 150. Home run deal. Just because we doubled the revenue and the income on it doesn't mean the property is worth double of what we paid for it. But in the commercial world, it does, because values are based on cap rates and net operating income. And so you have way more control over the valuation of the property, and you're rewarded handsomely for being a better operator because of the way that they're valued, right? So you just have way more control on the back end. So you get good cash flow, but then you get these huge pops on the back end of deals when you really increase the profitability of them.
Yeah. I love that, because you can come in, you can add value, you can bring them up. One of the things with these higher interest rates that I've also learned, like I've always watched and learned about cap rate and the ability to be able to add value control, and love that brings it more into your control. One of the things I found is interest rates kind of pull some of that out of your control, because it does the opposite, and will instantly lower your income and instantly on a higher interest rate, and can start to pull that out.
It can hurt your cash flow, but not necessarily your return, because your NOI is based on your net operating income. So that doesn't factor in your mortgage. So it's how much profit is this thing bringing in before your mortgage, right? And so a cap rate, simple example is, it's the rate of return that you would get on that property if you bought it all cash. So an 8 cap is an example. If you bought a property for $1 million all cash, you'd net 8%. So you'd be making 80 grand a year on that property, right? The problem is, like in multifamily as an example, if the cap rate is 4%, meaning if you paid all cash, you'd make 4%, but the interest rate is 8%, it's not generating enough. You're going to be losing money on that deal. And so there was this, for several years now, the demand for multifamily was massive. And so a lot of people were buying these deals that just didn't pencil. And you can get away with that when you're a huge private equity fund, when you're buying it all cash and your investors are cool with it. Because if you increase the value and then you sell it at a 4 cap, so for every dollar that you increase your net operating income or your profit on that deal at a 4% cap rate, every dollar you increase your profit, you increase the value by 25.
Okay.
So if you increase the profitability by 100 grand, right? You increase your bottom line by 100 grand on a deal, you just added $2.5 million in equity on the back end. So there's these huge pops on the back end. So if you have the backing to go buy these deals all cash, fix them up, and then exit, you get a much bigger pop. But if you're trying to buy it for cash flow, you're going to be in a tough spot. So
if I'm hearing you right, the interest rate, because it happens, you're excluding the mortgage out of it, and when you're doing these cap rates, so
exactly,
it doesn't affect your sell value as much,
but it affects your cash flow while you're holding
your personal cash flow. Okay, got it. How about on the short-term rental side? Do you see that swaying
Oh
the
yeah. And
values
that's been the
more or
challenge
less?
is I'm starting to see the prices come down a little bit, and everybody wants interest rates to come down. I would love that. The problem with that is when interest rates do come down, the values are going to shoot back up again. Prices are going to go up because people are going to jack up the prices because people are going to flood the market again. It's going to be like 2021, 2022 all over again. The problem is prices really haven't come down that much, even though interest rates have gone up. People are trying to hang on. And then you have this weird dichotomy of people that are living in houses at 2 to 3% interest rates. And they're like, all right, well, if I sell, I got to go buy at 7 or 8%. Why would I sell? So there's been this stagnant market for a bit, and it's catch 22. So to answer your question, yes, it does affect. And if you're buying now, you can still buy. You just got to buy at the right price so that you're generating a good enough return to still make money.
Yeah.
But if I got to pay the bank 8% and I can go make 20, I'm still netting 12% on the bank's money. So I'm good.
Are you seeing that? I mean, it seems like the last couple of years, as things have gotten a little bit more stagnant, the hype has kind of settled down a little bit more. But we are still in this market where, maybe it's becoming a little bit more of a buyer market. Maybe there's a little bit more opportunity to negotiate better terms,
Oh
better
yeah.
rates. Guys that are like in it for the long term and digging in. How are you seeing them create deals creatively with our current interest rates? What are some of the things that are working out there?
I mean, it's exactly what you said. You just have way more negotiating power now. So just because somebody's listing a property for 800,000 doesn't mean that you have to offer 800,000. What if you offered 550? Right? And people are like, "Oh man, if I have this line, like if you don't cringe when you submit your first offer, you probably offered too much." Right? And
Like
can
it.
you be comfortable when other people are uncomfortable?
Yeah.
Right? Just because they're asking that doesn't mean that they're going to get it. When we listed our primary house a couple of years ago, I ended up selling it for like 400 grand less than I wanted because we were just in that kind of market. And I was like, all right, whatever, just get rid of it. Just sell it. Right. You just have more negotiating power because there's a lot less people out there that are looking to buy a property. So it is much more of a buyer's market right now.
Are you seeing new investors that are getting into this? Obviously one mistake would be overpaying, but what are some of the other common mistakes that new short-term rental investors coming in might make as they're picking up their first deals?
Not knowing how to evaluate the deal, like just taking the information from the broker and assuming that it's true. So like I give people my deal analyzer and trainings around that for free because whether people want to work with me or not, I'm like, if I can just keep you out of a bad deal, I'm happy. Because, a broker wants to sell a deal. So they're going to paint the rosiest picture that they can about that deal. It is what it is. Like they're not doing anything wrong, but they're motivated to sell a deal. So if a broker's giving you information about it, maybe they're giving you data from 2022, 2023. You're like, cool. What did you do over the last 12 months when the market cooled off? Like, right. So you gotta see through the lines and you gotta know where to get your data, right? So you can use AirDNA, you can use STR Insights, you can use Rabu. There's a bunch of different data sites to go out there and learn how to underwrite deals. If you don't understand the numbers, get some help from somebody that knows how to underwrite the numbers because you make your money when you go into a deal and you can't fix a bad deal. It's too late.
Yeah. So you're coaching a lot of people coming in, starting more experience, probably across the realm. What are of your students you're seeing when you're picking somebody out, and what are the qualities that are making a good, successful student? And maybe if you got a personal, a story of a particular one that's, done really well, what does that look like?
The first things first is you got to have a desire. You got to want it because the information online, yes, it's a cool business. It's a fun business, but it's not always sunshine and rainbows, right? I've had a lot of bad days in this business. It is what it is. It's part of it. It's part of any business, right? So if you don't have a strong enough why, at a certain point, you're going to give up, right? At the beginning, I think it's like the 5 phases of success or something, right? At the beginning, there's this ignorant optimism. Like you just don't know what you don't know and you think it's going to be amazing. And then you get into it and you have informed pessimism. Oh man, this is way harder than I thought. And then it gets harder. And then there's this valley of despair. And this is where most people quit. But then on the other side of it, once you learn from it and you come out, you're like, okay, now I have informed optimism, right? But most people, they get in thinking it's going to be super easy and it's going to be all sunshine and rainbows. And then they get hit with problem after problem after problem, and then they quit. The ones that do the best are the ones that have a really strong why. They're really clear about what they want, and they're coachable. They're coachable. Like, they'll do what we ask them to do, even when they're afraid, because it's easy to just continue staying busy doing stuff that you're comfortable with instead of doing the right things that are going to move the business forward. Simple example. Somebody's spending a week screwing around with their business cards and their business website instead of going out and prospecting. Your business card doesn't even matter at the end of the day. Like, nobody really cares. They want to know your story and what product or service you offer, and you need to go talk to people.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking from personal experience, because remember, I'm a different guy than I was 10 years ago. I was the guy behind the computer as a CPA, just crunching numbers all day. I barely knew how to talk to people, never mind sell anybody on a service. So that took me a long time of just getting out of my comfort zone, going out there, talking to people, getting rejected, talking to more people, getting rejected again, right? You got to develop some thick skin, and it gets easier when you have three things. When you have the right strategy, meaning you're doing the right things, you're in the right environment of people that will support, encourage, and challenge you, and then you're around the right coaches and mentors that have been where you are and gotten to where you want to go. And they're like, this is normal. You're good. I'm going to hold your hand through this process. And it just pulls you through that valley of despair. That's what you need. And I don't care if it's real estate, a health goal, a relationship goal, like those three things will get you any goal that you want.
Yeah. Now I'm a huge advocate, and probably to the point where I'm, I probably need to, back off on being part of so many different groups, but I just find I get empowered if I'm around other cool people that are doing cool things that, I can talk with and say, when I run into this problem, what are the things that you did to move it up? And then, also just be able to look at and say, hey, if I'm operating at my top, if I'm in a room where no one else is operating above me, it's not pushing me to go any further. And so if I'm in a room where other guys are doing cooler things, then, I can start to look and say, look, this, here's the next level we can go up. You're leading a lot of those rooms, and I know I've seen you in some of these rooms as well, continuing to develop yourself. What are some of the rooms that you're getting in these days that are continuing to help you inspire and grow? And what are the things that you're excited about moving forward here?
It's funny you bring that up, because I was literally just evaluating that area, right? I run a lot of masterminds, and I've spoken at other people's masterminds, and I've been part of other people's masterminds. And there's a couple that I'm looking at now to just be the smallest fish in the room, right? Like the Tiger Twins of the world, where you got to be at least worth, I think it's 20 million to get in there. I'm like, all right, where am I at? Can I get in that room where most people are at 100 million and above? Right? Being a small fish in those rooms is what always pulls me up. And I've said that since the beginning, getting into masterminds. At first, it felt very, very, very uncomfortable. And one of two things happens. You either leave or you level up, because everybody else in that room, it's just normal to have this level of success and income and relationships and health and whatever else. So it normalizes the goal for you. But if that makes you too uncomfortable, then you leave, because you go back to where you've been before. Right. So having those people that can pull you up is huge, so I'm always looking for what's that next room that I can get in where I'm the small fish to just absorb and have those people pull me up.
How are you, like one of the things when I invest into a mastermind group, I always want to think about, there's a return on investment, but then there's a return on relationships. And I'm, looking at these always long-term of, not how I come in and get the most, but give the most and be able to build some long-term relationships that'll pay off maybe 10, 20 years versus tomorrow. What are some of your suggestions if you're getting into these rooms and you're paying for large masterminds to actually get good return on investment, return on relationships when you're stepping into those rooms?
You're going to get in, you're going to get out whatever you put into it. So if you're going in and you're just trying to suck everything out that you can, you're going to limit yourself, right? Everybody has value to add. I got to interview Damon John last year for WealthCon, right? That was awesome. And I was hanging out with him backstage. The thing that I noticed with very successful people is they're always eager to learn. They're like a sponge. So like he's drilling me with questions, like prodding about certain things, like how are you doing this and how are you doing this, right? And if you go into those masterminds, you can always add value. Maybe it's not in the wealth bucket, but maybe your health is super dialed in, or maybe your relationship with your wife is super dialed in, or your husband, right? And you can just add value and just be genuinely interested in people. If people are there and feel like you're just transactional, it's going to put up a wall, right? Like I'm a member at a country club. I don't talk too much about business. Like while we're there, I have friends at this place now. But the interesting thing is over time, I learned that a bunch of them own development companies or in different verticals. And so if I need a contact somewhere, I'm like, hey, you know, Pat, do you got a contact for this? I'm working on this project. You got anybody that you'd recommend for this? Right. So it's more like that. And I just enjoy hanging out with them. Right. And if
Yeah.
there's business that comes out of it, that's fine. If I'm new though, like if I'm just starting my journey and I'm looking for a mastermind, I look for those three things, right? Like, has this person achieved what I want to achieve? Have they helped a lot of other people achieve what I want to achieve? And do I actually want to be around this person? Like, do I just jive with this person in general? Right? Simple example. Bill Faith is my partner for STR WealthCon. Bill and I are very different people, right? And I've got a great relationship with Bill, but he's going to attract certain people that vibe with his energy, and I'm going to attract people that vibe with my energy. And there's no right or wrong, but there's certain people in Bill's mastermind that would have no desire to go have lunch or play golf with me. And there's people in mine that probably feel the same, right? So it's like, who do you vibe with? And have they gotten the results and helped other people get those results? At that point, early in the journey, you are looking for specifically, how can this take me from here to here? As you continue to grow, I look for rooms that are going to challenge my thinking and current beliefs. Because when I get new ideas and new beliefs of what is possible and what's not possible, that's where real growth comes. But at the beginning, you're just trying to get some actionable strategy to build your momentum.
Well, let's talk a little bit about STR Wealth 2025. I got the opportunity to see you and Damon on the stage last year. That was fire. I mean, just what an incredible room that was that you guys created. What do you guys have coming up for 2025 this year?
Yeah, man, I'm really excited. We're always going bigger and bigger, and so it's July 22nd to the 25th down in Nashville at the Music City Center. It's a massive venue. We'll have about 3,000 people there. We've got Pace Morby coming back to do a keynote, and then a 2-hour or 3-hour track around creative finance with Jerry Norton and some of his buddies to really help people with that. We got Cody Sanchez that's keynoting the event, so I'm really excited to meet her and hear from her, doing a lot of big things in the private equity space and from just a business knowledge standpoint. I'm going to be running a 3-hour boutique hotel track. We're going to be running a 3-hour advanced scaling track for co-host and management businesses. How do you go from 5 to 20, 20 to 50, 50 to 100? And what does that business model look like? And how do you continue to scale and build that business up? Bill's going to be running a marketing track. We got a bunch of tons and tons of tracks that are catered specifically to different people's needs. Because what we found is when you get 3,000 people in there, everybody's at a different level. So how do we service them at the highest level? Well, let's do different tracks and breakouts to give them exactly what they need, where they are in their journey. And then we bring everybody back to the main room we have 6 main keynotes, maybe 7 this year, to address everybody. But we want to give people actionable stuff to meet them where they're at this year. And the content is amazing, right? I'm biased. I think the content's really good. But a lot of the feedback I get is the connections that people made in that room. So like one of my boardroom members, Rashmi, she's gotten 2 or 3 hotel deals at WealthCon over the last 2 years, right? I was speaking at Tony Stancato's Michigan STR Summit. He met his business partner at STR WealthCon 3 years ago, right? Like the connections that you make in that room. So if you're an introvert like me, get to the conference and set a goal for yourself to just network and meet as many people as possible. Not just give them a business card and tell them what you do, like just talk to people. because you never know what's going to come out of those rooms, right? Bill and I met on Clubhouse years ago during COVID and just started talking and hitting it off. And then like, yeah, I want to do a big event. He's like, no way, I want to do a big event. And then next thing you know, we partnered up and now we've got the largest STR conference in the world.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to come out of those events.
A little testimony to that. So your boutique hotel breakout room in that, we ended up meeting a set of local investors here in Denver. They've ended up investing in our hotel. They've gotten to be really good friends, wonderful people that, I go and have coffee with every couple of weeks that came out of that room. They're interested in doing the same similar things. Met Blake Daly there, got to go to his boutique hotel con. Rich Summers joined his mastermind group. So yeah, a lot of good things come into those little, you realize there's a lot of nuances and niches, within this STR wealth world. And it's a really fun place when you start breaking it down to be able to connect. And the big room's awesome. A lot of good, insight and energy that comes out of that. But, it's just like in church, you break it down into small groups, you might be able to have the chance to make those a little bit deeper conversations and be able to actually build some things out of it. So that's our testimony from your little breakouts. That was hugely helpful.
That's awesome, man. I didn't know that. That's super cool.
Yeah. Yeah, you probably know Fernando and Margarita. I think they're part of your.
Yes. Yeah, they're in the boardroom.
In the boardroom as well. Great people. Yeah. So STR 25 is happening. What are some of the other things to be looking at in this 2025, like shifting economy, world's changing? What are the things that are going to be on the topics that you guys might be talking about at 2025?
I know for me, I'm not sure what Bill's talking about yet, honestly, on his keynote, but I know for me, I'm going to be sharing some things that I am betting 99% of people in our industry are not thinking about from a much bigger perspective on where you can take this thing, right? It's great. It got me out of a job, but when you can tie in a lot of the other bigger pieces, there is a way bigger play that you could make if you choose to create some serious wealth for yourself and your family that nobody's really talking about. So I'm going to break that down in some of the games that I'm playing now in that space and also in the hotel space. We'll have some deep dives around revenue management, likely have some stuff around midterm rentals, which I know was a super hot topic a couple of years ago. Kenny Bedwell is our title sponsor from STR Insights. So I'm sure he'll be doing a nice data dump of all the trends and what to be looking for in 2025 going into 2026. Cody Sanchez is going to light up the room per usual. Pace will be talking a lot about creative financing, which is super applicable right now with where interest rates are. So when you can do creative financing, seller financing, it just unlocks a completely new world for you and you can make deals work. And the cool thing in the commercial space is it's normal to do creative finance and seller carrybacks and all these things. Like people expect it. It's normal, which may not be as much of the case in single families, right? I've done creative finance deals on the commercial side. It's just normal, right? And so we've got a packed list. You can check it out at strwealthconference.com. You can get all the details in there. Tickets are super reasonable, honestly. Like they should be charging way more, but we want to help as many people as possible. And it's just going to be a great time.
Definitely worth it. Recommend everybody
for a ton of people to get together.
Yeah. Go get it. Go get a ticket. Check it out. It'll change your life. It's worth doing. I'm curious as a CPA person with the recent tariffs and some of Trump's legislation on real estate with accelerated depreciation coming back. Some of these topics, how are those affecting your strategy in real estate, or are they? Is it just noise?
I mean, a lot of it's noise. A lot of it, I mean, the bonus depreciation is huge, right? As you continue to build wealth and you're looking at your portfolio strategically of like, okay, I'm meeting with my financial advisor, my CPAs. Okay, where do I think we're going to land this year? All right, if bonus depreciation is coming back, all right, should we amend prior returns, do all these different things? So from a tax strategy standpoint, it's huge. And you could save a ton of money between cost segregation studies and learning how to play this game, which is one of the greatest benefits of real estate that a lot of people don't realize. And one of the huge aspects of short-term rentals, as long as you're participating in the management and there's qualifications, I'm not going to get into all that. No accounting or legal advice here, but there are loopholes in there that you can offset, your primary income if you meet certain qualifications. So if you could take 200 grand of depreciation against your $200,000 salary, that means you're not paying taxes, right? So simple example, but there's huge power in the taxation side of things. I think the whole tariff thing has definitely created waves. And the thing that I've noticed is the booking windows have shortened. So instead of somebody booking, my Disney house, say 6 months out, we're getting a lot of bookings 30 days out, which is interesting. So, right. So a lot more last minute travel. So I've noticed it changing the booking window patterns in the portfolio. And that's important to recognize because it's going to dictate your revenue management strategy. So previously, the closer you got, it'd be harder to book. So you want to drop your rates. Now, in that same scenario, you want to hold and maybe even bump your rates as you get closer to maximize that RevPAR. So paying attention to those booking patterns for yourself and your booking windows, meaning, for July, how many people booked your place in January versus February versus March versus April versus May versus the month of compared to last year, right? And is that changing? And do you need to adjust your pricing accordingly?
Awesome. Last question, as an architect, I like to know, what are the design trends or architecture pieces that you feel help most increase value on your short-term rentals and boutique hotels?
Well, I unfortunately have a cheat code in that my wife has an amazing interior design business. And
Nice.
So I have a leg up on a lot of people. I'll plug On Design Interiors. They're amazing. They design all of our hotel stuff and a lot of our student stuff. But, I would say that professional design is no longer optional. That's just the minimum. Like, you need to have your place professionally designed to stand out and not look like a home, look like an experience. That's bar minimum. And then a lot of it comes down to an amenity game, right? Of how can great property in a great location. What are the amenities that I can add to this property or that the property naturally has, right? Bill's always talking about his Montana place because it has the lake and the views and all this stuff, right? You can't just go and plop a lake in your backyard, right? Most likely, right? So what are some of those intangibles that you can get in a property and what can you add to a property, right? I was a couple minutes late to this podcast because I was evaluating a hotel deal with one of our boardroom people and they're trying to figure out, all right, what amenities should we add to this place? Is it worth the $300K for this pool compared to this pickleball court and this thing and this thing and this thing? And it's really understanding your avatar and who you're trying to attract and the seasonality of your market, right? This is a northern market where they're going to get to use that pool for 3 months. So, all right, let's reverse engineer that. How much higher of an ADR do we think we can get for 3 months out of the year because you have an outdoor pool versus what if we had some type of other amenity that would be able to be used year round, right? So it just becomes a game of, all right, if I'm going to invest X, what's that going to do to my nightly rate and ultimately my bottom line, and just start playing that game. So it's kind of one-upping everybody around the amenities game.
Do you drive your wife crazy that you spreadsheet all of her beautiful design ideas?
I drive her crazy when I set budgets. Like, that sounds amazing, but we need to cut that in half, right?
Yeah. I've been my own worst client, this last year designing this thing. It is so hard when you're having to, come up with brilliant ideas and then cut it back down to a spreadsheet. Usually it's the developer across the table from you that you're having to fight with. But when you're yourself, you're just, all right, I got to do it.
It's worse when it's your wife.
Yeah, love it. Well, Mike, if people want to connect with you, where is the best place for them to connect with you with all the different stuff you got going on?
Probably the best place that I'm most active is on Instagram. It's at Mike.Sjogren. It's S as in Sam, Jogren. We also have a private Facebook group. If you Google short-term rental secrets, you can find us on Facebook. We've got, 11 or 12,000 members in there. We do free live trainings in there every single week to just help people out. And I've got a free 6-part course in there and a whole bunch of valuable stuff in there to just help as many people as we can, completely free. So go check those out.
Love it. Well, you're helping a lot of people out there, Michael. When I started this podcast about a year ago, it was one of my goals to get you on here. So it's been a real honor to have you on today, to get to spend some time with you. So thank you so much for all that you're doing and for spending time with us on Radical Hospitality.
That's awesome, man. Thank you. Really appreciate it.